All right. Good morning, everyone. Thank you for joining us on episode 129 of Blowback, Exposing Imperial Decline. I have my regular co-host, Ian Kummer from a suburb in Moscow, and I have our two special guests, Greg Rosen from Chicago, Illinois, and Max Parry, currently residing in Baltimore, Maryland.
Correct.
So thank you two guys very much. First thing we're going to talk about is peace in the Middle East. So that's the title, and that, of course, references our the big news of the past couple days, the ceasefire. Who gets credit, and what's going on behind the scenes, and is this really something that we can be happy with and support? Who would like to go first? I could definitely go first, or I'm happy to take volunteers regarding the ceasefire.
It's something I've been itching about all week, so unless there's someone dying to go, I can go first.
Okay.
But yes, I just want to say that whole election cycle was, it was disgusting for a lot of reasons, but I think that was without a doubt the most disgusting because it was the protesters, the Free Palestine protesters, were calling Biden, Genocide Joe, because he's literally funding and putting the weapons in the hands of the people committing the genocide, and it was a bullying tactic, and it was particularly amazing about it is that Democrats, mainstream establishment Democrats, actually reached across the aisle and joined forces with right-wing Zionists against people in their own party, against their own voters, which is astonishing. And the whole argument was that, yes, they weren't really even denying it. They're like, yes, it's a genocide. I mean, I don't think they really... I mean, some people denied, still deny it's a genocide, but there were people saying, yes, it's a genocide, but Trump would be worse. And I've said this on this show before, if Biden, and it's not the only reason, but this is one of the big reasons, if Kamala Harris had won that election, it would have effectively been the end of the American political system, because it would mean you can run any candidate, no matter how stupid and useless that person is, and no matter what crimes they're participating in. It would make the whole, I think the system's already kind of a joke, but there wouldn't even be a sense of pretending anymore. That's just a joke. It's a farce. I do think there would be serious domestic consequences. I think that would have been too much for a lot of people on both the right and the left if Kamala had won. And I also said one thing I've been saying for the past couple months. I was saying I was hopefully optimistic about both Ukraine and Israel, and I was saying, I think Billy Bob, I think you said this as well, maybe. I don't remember what your exact take on this was, but it is, Trump is a Zionist. No one's denying that Trump is a big, basically Israel first type person with a Jewish son-in-law and all of this, and he's a New York businessman. But I've always had this feeling that, he's very self-serving, which in this case is actually a good thing because Trump is always about putting Trump as number one. So he's not going to fall. I said I doubted he was going to fall on his sword like the Biden administration, not just him, because I think he's kind of a potato, but collectively they fell. That whole administration basically politically fell on their swords because they were so unwilling to even really give lip service to opposing Israel. But it's like, it would be, he could use those connections in AIPAC and with, Zionist movement and with Israel, as a friend. He could say, hey, look, I support you. We're not going to cut you off or screw you over, but you need to not screw me over. You need to call this a day and stop that operation in Gaza. And I said there's actually a fairly high chance that would happen. And if it did happen, that is, of course, better than a genocide. Let's be honest. It's a little early to celebrate. I'm trying to restrain myself from celebrating too much because it's too early to. But And there have already, of course, been ceasefire violations, but we can be optimistic. This is going to be, we're in the end stretch of this thing. And that is better, even because, a bad peace is always better than a good war. It's just, it's get it to stop. That's an improvement. And I think it should be, it's amazing to me that Biden and all these, these lapdogs can all stand up there and try to take credit for it when it should be perfectly obviously get no credit and not feel humiliated. They should feel it's completely humiliating. 15 months of saying, oh, there's nothing we can do. We can't do anything. And then Trump makes a phone call. And by the way, Trump is not the first person to make a phone call.
Right.
Israel has understood their limitations historically. Like they've understood it with Reagan. They've understood it with Clinton. They've consistently known when they were going too far and stepped back when somebody in Washington, usually the president, makes that phone call. So you're getting too far out of line for us. But Biden, for whatever reason, I don't know if it's because I think we might have had this perfect storm of a guy who's, let's be honest, he's a potato. He was a potato even before he was elected, for God's sake. Right. And you have Blinken, who is, partial to Israel. And then you have this room of clowns. It's just clowns. Not a single person in that building is qualified or deserves to be there. And it was just like deer in the headlights. They were just on autopilot this whole time. And no one was even willing to divert course or do anything. So that's my.
You think that cost him the election? I mean,
I think it's I didn't know, right, because it was too early after the election to say, but I think it was true that was a motivating factor, and I unfortunately don't remember the name of the publication, but I saw yesterday there was a survey that found 29 that somehow they'd gone out and interviewed people who did not vote, who didn't vote, and asked them, why did you stay home? And apparently 29% of Democrats who stayed home. 29%, by the way, is enough to have theoretically, especially if they were in the right places in the Electoral College, that is enough to have actually given Kamala Harris the election. They said, I stayed home because of the Gaza, the genocide. So I think that we might have not been giving it enough credit. I mean, in myself included, that was it certainly hurt. And this is the problem with being the Democrat, the liberal candidate, is that it will hurt you more than it will hurt the Republican conservative right-wing candidates. Because here's the thing, if Biden and Kamala had done the right thing and stopped this 15 months ago, they might have still lost the election. And that's because for leftist and liberal voters, it's doing the right thing on the Gaza is just the bare minimum. It's like, okay, well, you're the Democrat. Of course you're supposed to do the right thing. We didn't really even give him credit for it. But the fact that he didn't do the right thing was just so crazy and unacceptable. It hurt him more than it could even theoretically hurt Trump.
I mean, that's interesting. I think there's a counter argument that might say if Biden had been more opposed to the genocide, the Israel lobby would have even more than they already did thrown all of their support behind Trump, and that could have made Trump win too. But it's speculation.
I have a lot to say about this topic.
Go for it. I've been talking for a while. Let's go.
Well, first of all, I think that this is quite possibly the biggest indictment of the Democratic Party and American liberalism as we know it that I've seen in my lifetime, because we now know for a fact that had Harris won the election, despite all the, as you aptly described, the bullying tactics I encountered it so much myself from American leftists saying, well, Trump is going to be worse on Israel. And, it was sort of, in some respects, hard to argue with that because, yes, like when you look at the especially like in his cabinet, these like apocalyptic Christian Zionists and Dominionists like Hegseth and these people that he's appointed, they at least like were able to get away with making that sort of argument. But my inkling always was that that was not the case because of what you were saying about Trump being selfish. But on top of that, his approach to foreign policy has always been very transactional. I mean, the fact that he was willing to sit down with the Taliban and North Korea, and also Trump. The other factor here is that Trump has nearly as close a ties, be it personally or within the administration with Kushner, with these Gulf states, these Arab states, who are, what Israel is doing, even though those countries are really crypto Zionist states and have, really gone along with what Israel has been doing, that's been to their detriment. And this has become a big problem for them because their populations, even though they're not democracies, obviously, they're the perception is very clear that they've basically gone along with what Israel is doing, and people are not happy about it. And so this has become a problem for them because I think that they were also, they're also facilitating these talks, but I think that they wanted an end to this because it's become a political conundrum for them. And Trump was able to, Trump's envoy at least was able to get Israel to sign on the dotted line. I mean, it was his envoy. I mean, Biden has tried to take credit for this, but the Arab negotiators in Qatar were very clear that it was Trump's envoy. That was the X factor that had not been there before. And also, there's no question that it was Trump's diplomatic team that brought about the ceasefire, because if you look at what they agreed to, it's the exact same thing that was proposed over half a year ago. So they would have an argument that it was, that Biden should get credit had there been additional, concessions made, demands made from Hamas, but it was the exact same agreement. So literally the X factor.
Not to cut you off, but to add to that, I think it's actually the same. I mean, the details on the numbers might be different, but I think it's basically the same deal that Hamas offered like days or a week after October 7th. It's just, it was what was on the table to begin with.
Yeah, meaning that there are all these people, I mean, not that they all haven't needlessly died, but a significant amount of lives could have presumably been saved had political pressure from Biden been put on the Israelis. And for whatever reason, I don't care what the reason is. I don't care if it's for selfish reasons. I mean, they make everything about Trump. If you really care about saving the Palestinians, it doesn't matter what the motivation for, the Trump diplomatic team, whether it was self-serving or not. I mean, and we don't know what comes next. Sure, Israel could violate this and get the green light from Trump to do whatever. But nevertheless, there is a ceasefire that would not have happened had Harris won the election. And so all these people that tried to bully those of us who dissented and refused to participate in this sham of an election, I mean, they can't make the argument that Trump is worse anymore, really. I mean, I don't know how anyone could be any worse. I mean, sure, we don't know what comes next. We don't know if war with Iran is on the horizon. But nevertheless, there is it's not an endorsement of Trump by any means, but nevertheless, there has always been, whether it's with Ukraine and Russia or even with Israel, there is a silver lining to his style of realist foreign policy. And, I think that, even in his first term, I knew this going into this because I had a feeling that this was going to happen. Because even in his first term, there were stories that Trump and Netanyahu, who had a falling out in the last year of his first term, because Trump, whose whole shtick is the art of the deal, wanted to get credit for his presidential legacy, for facilitating some kind of agreement, long-term agreement between the Israelis and Palestinians. And Netanyahu would not go along with it. And that, Trump had done all this stuff for the Israelis, moving, recognizing moving the capital, the embassy from Tel Aviv to Jerusalem, recognizing Judaism as a nationality, terminating the JCPOA. And, I guess Netanyahu wasn't willing to come to any kind of other agreement. And I've seen Trump make more critical statements of Netanyahu, certainly than Biden. And I think that Israel, despite the fact that on the surface, Trump, yes, is more of a full throttle, out and out Zionist, he's also wildly unpredictable. And I think that the Israelis don't like that in comparison to what they get with Blinken, and Biden, and who just roll over and do whatever the fuck they want. Trump will, yes, say one thing like there will be hell to pay to Hamas, which is, a threat to actually escalate what's been going on the last 450 some days. But then he also turns around and, has his diplomats tell Israel, no, you have to agree to this ceasefire because I don't want to deal with this with my incoming administration. So I think Trump's unpredictability, he was the same way with North Korea. I mean, he, on the one hand, made insane bellicose threats that no measured, well-spoken U.S. president would make. But then he also is the only president that's willing to step over the fucking demarcation line and, for this photo op, and he also, the other thing is he's really doing the exact same thing that he did in his first administration. I think Trump is a lot more savvy than people give him credit for. He's appointed all these, Rubio, all these people that are basically neocons to these important positions who are presumably going to undermine, his America First agenda, assuming he's sincere about it. And I think that it's really a keep thy enemies closer to me kind of philosophy. The first term, I thought he was just an idiot who didn't know what he was doing. But now that he's doing this again in his second term, I think he actually does have a method to his madness with these appointments. I think I think is more pragmatic and savvy a politician than he appears to be because of his style, but I think that there is actually a logic to what he's doing. I mean, he can't appoint whoever he wants. Well, that's clear with somebody like Hegseth. So he has to resort to, making sort of deals with these people that were previously his political enemies, like Rubio, and sort of navigate his way that way, his own agenda, I guess.
Is Hegseth not getting confirmed?
I don't think it's going to happen.
Huh. I wasn't sure, but it's still up in the air. It's not for sure that he's not, but you're thinking it's not going to happen.
I mean, I would be really shocked. I mean, I just cannot picture generals reporting to this guy. I mean, it just doesn't compute.
You also mentioned that Trump called Judaism a nation, or what did he do?
He recognized Judaism as a nationality.
I didn't know that. That's interesting.
Yeah, it was a big. I mean, it was.
I'm surprised that's not anti-Semitic.
Well, it is.
It is.
Zionism is anti-Semitic, but yeah, it's.
Well,
that's what they believe. They think that Jews are non-native to Europe and that they belong in a certain. I mean, going all the way back to to the Theodore Herzl, and he interpreted the rise in anti-Semitism in Europe as confirmation of his beliefs that, like, yeah, we don't belong here. We need to have our own state, and that we need to be in a. But unfortunately, that meant also that they considered Argentina and Chile and the
Madagascar,
Patagonia. They considered British East Africa. But then they, because those places had no religious significance. I mean, Herzl himself wasn't religious, but they ended up, obviously doing what they did, colonizing Palestine.
Yeah, I wonder what the implications are of designating them as saying that the United States government sees Judaism as a nationality. Is that it?
Yeah. I mean,
I wonder what that. Yeah, I don't know.
I think it was supposed to be
certainly
symbolic.
aligns us with our Nazi legacy. So that was their view.
Yeah.
I want to say that based on, your comments about the neocons, what it is a coalition. I don't know if it's of course, we can't say yet if it's a successful coalition, but there does need to be amending the fence between the new right, the nationalist right, and the neocons, or it's just because if the Republican Party has that kind of slim majority in both houses, but it's not a majority at all if they split. So they do need to mend the fence. So it doesn't necessarily mean if I would say if these guys undermine Trump, then it's a failed coalition. But if they bite, grind their teeth and go along with the important points, then it's a successful coalition because a coalition's about some compromises. And I'll also say with Republicans and conservatives in America in general, they, my eyes roll up in the back of my head talking to them, but at least there's a sense of pragmatism. And it just in the limousine left, it's not there at all. They're just completely dominated by emotion. Because at least with a war hawk Republican, they can say, okay, I wanted to do this military operation, but it's clear it's not working. I'm not getting what I wanted out of this. So if I'm not getting what I wanted, I'm going to stop or change course. But, these people in the Democrat Party are just crazy. Like they just feel like Trump or Putin or whoever it is personally offended to them. So they don't even care if it goes up to destroying the country or causing a nuclear war or whatever it is. They don't even care about results. I think you have something similar going on in Israel with, I can't say I'm super familiar with their internal politics, but seems with Netanyahu's party, they're just they're so emotionally driven, for this greater Israel and, ethnically cleansing northern Gaza. And it's just that what they want doesn't match up with their facts on the ground. It's just like, the IDF's flailed around for 15 months and they haven't accomplished anything except take a lot of casualties and inflict a huge amount of civilian losses. And it's terrible for Israel too, but they're upset that there's a ceasefire. So.
Yeah. Greg, did you have some thoughts?
Yes, Greg, let's hear what you think.
Specifically on the ceasefire.
Yeah. My feeling about Trump was he's squeamish about war generally, and this genocide was awful. Plus, Israel's, I think, by every measure, losing. Putting Gaza into rubble doesn't win this war. Hamas had been getting stronger. Lebanon continues to have Hezbollah there. So, I mean, other than Syria, they're not getting anywhere. And I don't think Trump appreciates funding a losing war chronically. It also, it says something about the Zionist lobby's lack of control over the president, because I don't think this was desired by them.
I remember when he was first running, he was calling out the other Republican nominees for taking money from Sheldon Adelson. And then as soon as he was the nominee, he started taking insane amounts from Adelson, and now Adelson's widow. But
when people talked about how he posted that Jeffrey Sachs little snippet where he complained about both Netanyahu and the lobby.
Yeah.
Right before this happened.
And apparently he watches Andrew Napolitano. So in addition to Tucker Carlson. So, I don't know what that signifies, but it's something.
So I was conjecturing that maybe, this whole PR offensive that Trump forced Israel to do something they didn't want to do. I was conjecturing that just might be choreographed theater, and including Trump, presenting Jeffrey, posting the Jeffrey Sachs video on Truth Social. So, I mean, I think Trump wants a media victory. He wants good optics, and he really did get great optics with this. And not only that, he made the Biden administration look feckless and weak, because before Trump's even in office, he got Israel to do something that Biden, couldn't do for 15 months. So it's great optics. But part of me thinks that Netanyahu is more than okay with giving Trump the optics. And quite possibly, maybe Netanyahu is getting something in return for those optics. We don't know.
No question. No question.
Right.
I don't know.
It reminds.
I don't know, man, because I think there's definitely a faction in Israel that wants this train wreck to be over and try to recover what's left of Israel's economy. But I think Netanyahu is in Zelensky's boat. The minute the war is over, he's done. And actually, it's actually worse than Zelensky, because he's actually got that ICC warrant. So,
well, and he has corruption charge. I mean,
he can't.
A factor like
Zelensky just has a flat in Miami, but
Netanyahu is stuck. If he goes to jail, he can't just skip the country, because he'll still end up in jail.
His future isn't as bright as Zelensky's. But I mean, this idea that Netanyahu was really resistant to do this, but Trump forced his hand, and part of Trump's forcing his hand was to warn him, hey, we've got leverage, and playing this.
Oh, we lost Greg. What happened to Greg?
Well, hopefully he'll pop back in.
Yes.
Yeah, he'll slide back in like Chris Collinsworth.
That's a Bengals reference. I don't even. Are you talking about as a commentator, Chris Collins?
Yeah. You don't notice that every time he's on it. His whole thing is he slides in.
Mm-hmm. No. He was a Raider hater, so I didn't care much for Chris Collinsworth, and then I think of him more as a player. But yeah, as a announcer, he was okay.
Yeah.
So I don't know. The question is, what is, let's assume Netanyahu was fine with it. He's giving Trump these optics that are really great. He's pretending to take the L, right? Netanyahu's going to take the L. We're going to do this ceasefire. So I'm thinking two things: either, the green light for an attack against Iran, either with the United States or without the United States. Ultimately, the United States is going to have to join in. Or there's going to be some annexations that the U.S. is going to, undercut. No, not undercut. Rubber stamp. They're going to rubber stamp some annexations in the West Bank and some land grabs.
Yes.
But ultimately, what makes me not so ecstatic about this peace, ceasefire is that, Zionism hasn't changed its stripes, since 1897. The whole goal of Zionism is to utilize genocide, basically ethnic cleansing, terrorism, ethnic cleansing, and land theft to grow Israel bigger and bigger and bigger with the largest possible Jewish majority on the largest possible geographic area. Like, that's Zionism in a nutshell since 1897, and that hasn't changed just because we have a ceasefire. And so I think, Trump is on board with the greater Israel agenda. I think, Netanyahu remains on board. And so if he agrees to a ceasefire, I don't really see it as good news. I see it as Netanyahu thinks that a ceasefire, he can use that. So he can use the ceasefire to regroup, because the Israel military wasn't really designed in any case for a prolonged war of attrition, which is what, Hamas has forced them to engage in, Hezbollah has forced them to engage in. So I think they're more than happy for a respite. And I think it's theater that they're at odds, and that Trump forced Netanyahu's hand. But that's my speculation.
I think theater is. Go ahead.
Corroborating the theater elements, I thought it was interesting how much the Israeli press was giving Trump a lot of credit, putting that article Max mentioned about the Arab diplomats, saying Trump did more than one meeting than, Biden did, working 24/7 for 15 months. And then, that has the same element of a lot of the Biden theater, which was Biden was supposedly so mad he's cursing out Netanyahu. Every few months that would happen. And so Trump does the same thing.
They're very upset. They just can't do anything.
Right. And then Trump's, the Sachs video kind of had the same effect of cursing out Netanyahu.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think that the pending corruption case against Netanyahu, his own political career is, his forget about the ICC warrant. That there's not going to be any change in policy between Trump and Biden on that. But with the, Israel's domestic political situation, the upheaval, the protests, which have nothing to do with the genocide. They don't care about that. It's about the fact that the way that Netanyahu's conducted the war and his corruption,
killing the
with a Hollywood film producer, buying, in exchange for tax break, getting him Cuban cigars and his wife designer handbags and all this stuff. That's what the Israelis are up in arms about. They could care fucking less about all the Palestinians getting killed. That's a real, the prosecution of that case, which will really be able to fully resume once with the war at a halt. I think that's the only terms in which Netanyahu would agree to something. And I think that there was probably some sort of deal that Netanyahu would, that Trump would provide some sort of security or provide some sort of political aid. I don't know what the details of it. This is just pure speculation on my part, but I think it must have had something to do with that. And also, Israel's expansionism, its annexations, like you were saying, Billy Bob. I think there's something was said to get them to halt what they're doing. That
I remember my word now. I meant to say underwrite instead of undercut. They're going to underwrite.
Yeah, and
I've heard three.
Like Mohammed bin Salman became in the Saudi war on Yemen for the United States, became a radioactive liability for the United States. That's what Netanyahu had become, and that's the press had, the New York Times, all these mainstream newspapers were putting everything on Netanyahu, and he'd become a political liability for Biden. And I think that Trump, said, no, you're going to be in good graces with the United States now that I'm in office. So in exchange for that, you need to sign here that sign the ceasefire agreement.
which he might, again, Netanyahu might, have use for a ceasefire agreement. He might be able to put that to good use. And, if they're not going to, so they want to move all the Palestinians out, they want to maybe have Egypt take them or something. And then they want to, annex the Gaza Strip. I mean, and so that didn't happen. That hasn't happened, but that it's not off the table. Like, it can still happen in the future. And that's the whole objective of Zionism. That's the whole, how do you say that in French? Raison d'être? I don't know. Their reason for living. Yeah.
So I've heard a few.
Go ahead.
Just to on what the deal was. One, I think 4 different scenarios I've heard at least. One is the software that Biden banned, that spy software, gets to be re-legalized. I forgot the name of it.
Yeah, I heard that. I forgot the name of it too.
You're talking about the Pegasus?
Pegasus.
Is it the one with the spyware that doesn't require any user interaction?
Oh, okay.
I want to say that was the same thing. Yeah, I thought that was.
Yeah,
Pegasus.
I think that's the one that Edward Snowden is always talking about. Yeah.
And then annexation of the West Bank, war with Iran, and phase 2 can be a military re-engagement, which I think Netanyahu has a lot of pressure domestically to construe the agreement.
Thanks for reminding me the other point that I was going to make, but that's exactly right. So, I mean, how is the ceasefire in Lebanon holding up? Like, I mean, doesn't Israel violate that with impunity whenever they want? So, again,
1,000 plus.
I'm not sure what Netanyahu is really losing or being forced to do. I don't think very much at all. And again, a ceasefire doesn't mean anything because Trump will not be holding Netanyahu accountable when Netanyahu does violate it, and he will violate it whenever he wants to. I don't know. Those are my thoughts. I'm glad. I hope the Palestinian people get a respite from the nonstop genocide and the bombs. But we've seen yesterday morning there was a whole bunch of dead, children. So I'm not sure. I'm optimistic. It's a big win for Trump optically. What actually results, I'm not sure. Now,
even it's been amazing to me that even the mainstream liberal news coverage has not been denying that it was Trump's the envoy that was instrumental in.
Yeah.
I mean, that's very rare to see. I mean, I don't know if that's just like they've really been taking a shit on Biden's legacy as he's outgoing. So I don't know if it's just about that they're throwing Biden under the bus and, because he's a lame duck now, but I've never seen the press so willing to give Trump credit for anything,
Yeah. I think Trump is he's what they're going to have to deal with. And I think, I kind of saw that shift again shortly before the election. The media just started treating Trump a little bit differently, a little bit better, a little bit nicer.
Yeah, that's true. That's very true.
I think there's a reason for that. I was gonna talk about freedom of speech, but I don't want to. If we want to go ahead and continue with this one, we can.
Yeah, I mean, one of my worries this week was, what is Hamas getting for accepting this right now, having Israel having done so poorly objectively in their war, other than genocide and destroying of Gaza?
Good question.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, considering the leader was assassinated, it's the same as the deal that was made with Hezbollah and Lebanon. They're definitely the losers in the agreement, but at least it's something,
It's a political victory. I think they're going to be, they can say we got all these prisoners out. So 1,000 plus prisoners.
And then phase 3, this made me feel a little better about it. If it gets to phase 3, has a lifting of the blockade, or at least one of the versions. the one that
I didn't
Hamas
realize it was going to
initially.
wait till phase 3. I thought they were supposed to start.
Well,
start
they
No, I
increased-
mean fully listing,
Okay.
lifting for
Yeah,
good.
they allowed trucks in the earlier phases, but it's supposed to be completely lifted at the end.
Yeah, no, that's a
which would be
win.
a
I mean,
major
that's
change.
good.
Well, the thing is, it's and just the fact that Hamas got Israel, which is on paper the most powerful military in the Middle East, and supported by probably 30-40% of the world's combined GDP is supporting Israel with unconditional and unlimited support. I would say Hamas is looking pretty good.
Looking good,
Yeah, no,
but still,
I think-
occupied and, in a militarized prison concentration camp.
But
No.
yeah, no, they can claim
it's
a
all
win.
relative.
They resisted. They're still there. They're getting a bunch of hostages back. It's
And,
a Pyrrhic victory for sure.
Well, and the other thing is that even
Right.
Israel is acknowledging that their numbers they've got the same numbers as when, yes, even though they've killed scores of their leadership, their recruiting has been off the charts because of what Israel's doing.
Yeah,
which is
and their
something that
performance over the last month has been
anyone could have told them that, because all this does is, I mean, if you're Palestinian and you're living in that region with what Israel's doing, I mean, you're in such a desperate situation that of course you're going to turn to militancy and be willing to fight. And this did not hurt their recruitment ability at all, and in fact fueled it. So they're right back to square one as far as like what their supposed military objectives were with this 400 some days of genocide. So.
Okay, I'm gonna segue into freedom of speech, and I get to go first this time. So what is bringing this whole topic up is seeing Max Blumenthal and Sam Husseini, just dragged out of the Blinken's farewell press conference.
And I will, Billy Bob, as long as you play a clip of Jim Acosta being told to sit down by Trump right after, because clearly that's on the same level. Jim Acosta being told to sit down by Trump and being bullied is clearly on the same level as these two journalists getting dragged out by security for asking tough questions. It's Trump that hates the media.
So okay, see, I wasn't even
I'm
going to go
kidding.
there.
I'm kidding.
I was going to make a larger ideological point about Western oligarchies using these bullshit principles, these bullshit human rights principles, as a weapon against other societies that are far more democratic insofar as they actually exist to serve the people. So number one, freedom of speech as a concept is flawed because nobody believes that we should have the right to say anything we want anywhere we want. So speech must be regulated, and nobody denies that. So when we talk about freedom of speech, what we're talking about is how do we regulate our speech? And so I would argue that Western oligarchies, regulate their speech in a way that is beneficial to their oligarchic interests. And when people's speech starts becoming threatening to the interests of the oligarchies, the oligarchs clamp down on the freedom of speech. And I would submit that the same is true, in places like China, where you have a communist party of, by, and for the people, which is my assertion. And when you have people, spreading lies, divisive things, those things are regulated by the government of, by, and for the people to and I think the people are happy about that. But the difference is in oligarchies, you have the oligarchs regulating speech in order to benefit their own interests and not really because they have any principled belief in freedom, right? So they don't really have a principled belief in freedom. Speech must be regulated, and they end up, regulating speech in a way that they are never held accountable, right? So there is no accountability at all for the oligarchs. I mean, somebody made the point, who was held responsible for the big financial collapse, the big financial collapse of 2008? Who was held responsible for the Iraq War? Nobody. Nobody. Okay. So the only way we can hold people responsible is basically what Max and Sam tried to do. And so I just want to point out that this is just how oligarchy functions. So do we want to go into those clips, or do we want to
Sure, let's
contradict what I
clips.
said? Okay.
Let's watch the clips first and then talk about it.
All right. So this one is Max. Let's see here. I'm not prepared. I got carried away talking.
It's interesting.
So-
It's interesting you said the word oligarchy, because that's what Biden was warning we were heading
Oh yeah,
for
I
a
saw that.
farewell address.
No, that's hilarious. He's like Eisenhower now, apparently.
I think that's what it was. I think that's literally what it was. He's trying to cement. He's trying to create a legacy. It's ridiculous, of course, but
yeah, no, he's like warning us, and so he can tell us, "I told you so. I told you so. I was on your side the whole time."
Meanwhile, Hillary Clinton was saying that anyone that spreads disinformation online should be criminally prosecuted.
we have to suspend the First Amendment because it's getting in the way or whatever it was.
Yeah.
She said, yeah.
Okay, so actually we went to Sam Husseini first. So I had two tabs open, and we're doing the Sam Husseini tab. So this one's a little bit longer, 2 minutes and 20 seconds. You can see here Count Smirkula is about to go get the police, sick the police on Sam Husseini. So yeah, let's just watch. It's 2 hours, 2 minutes and 20 seconds. Let's see.
God, the city said simply, you're being reborn. It's also a moment of historic possibility.
You can leave, sir.
Again, I'm happy to address questions.
No,
I want him to answer my question.
We're answering
He's gonna
questions.
speak for an hour.
Thank you.
It's gonna be lots of speeches.
Thank you.
I mean, answer some questions.
I look forward to answering questions. Thank you.
Instead of making another speech every day.
Sir, would you like to be escorted out?
Go away.
You don't have to escort them.
Yeah, get him, Matt.
I want him to answer questions.
I look forward to answering questions in a minute.
I'm a
Thank
journalist.
you.
I'm not a potted plant.
Everyone will have an opportunity to ask questions in just a minute. Thank you.
Miller has explicitly told me he will not answer my questions.
So, thank you.
I'm justified
So-
in what I'm doing.
I have no greater pleasure in this job than crossing off a list I carry in my pocket, the names of those who have been arbitrarily detained and unfairly held hostage, unjustly held hostage, and bringing them home, returning them to their families, returning them to their loved ones. Finally,
Get your hands off me.
this morning,
Get your hands off me. Get your hands off me. Get your hands off me. Answer a damn question.
I look
Do you know
forward to
about the
answering
Hannibal
questions in
Directive?
minutes.
Do you know about Israel's nuclear weapons? Everybody from the ICJ. I was sitting here quietly, and now I'm being manhandled by 2 or 3 people. You pontificate about a free press. You pontificate about a free press. You are hurting me. You are hurting me. You are hurting me. I am asking questions after being told by Matt Miller that he will not answer my questions until I ask him
Please, sir,
questions.
respect the
Wasn't the
process.
wasn't
An opportunity to take
wasn't the
questions in 2
IC
minutes.
wasn't the point of the May 31st statement to block the ICJ orders? You blocked the ICJ orders. You
Please, sir, respect the process. Thank you.
respect the process. Respect the process. Well, everybody from Amnesty International. From Amnesty International to the ICJ saying that Israel's doing genocide and extermination. You're telling me to respect the process. Criminal, why aren't you in The Hague? Why aren't you in The Hague? Why aren't you in The Hague?
Well, the thing is, I mean, Blinken's time in the sun, I think, is over. I don't think we're going to hear from Blinken anytime soon. Maybe never. I mean, really, what's Blinken going to do after this?
He could get a job at Columbia like Vicki Newland. We will find out. I'm pretty sure. He's gonna be greeted with open arms from the establishment. Like he'll have a bright future in academia. People might protest him if he tries to travel, just like George W. Bush. But could he return to politics? He could be in another administration. I don't know. He might be tainted by this point. This is Max Blumenthal. Let's see. So this is a minute long.
Everyone in this room knows we had a deal. You kept the bombs going. Why did you sacrifice the rules-based order on the mantle of your commitment?
I mean, look.
Why did you allow my friends to be massacred? Why did you allow my friends' homes in Gaza to be destroyed when we had a deal in May? You helped destroy our religion, Judaism, by associating it with fascism. You waved the white flag before Netanyahu. You waved the white flag before Israeli fascism.
I look forward to taking questions
Your
when I get a chance
father-in-law
to
was an
finish my
Israel
statement.
lobbyist. Your
Thank you.
grandfather was an Israel lobbyist. Are you compromised by Israel? Why did you allow the Holocaust of our time to happen? How does it feel to have your legacy be genocide? How does it feel to have your legacy be genocide? You too, Matt. You smirk through the whole thing every day. You smirk through a genocide.
Nice.
Thank you.
So there was another clip that caught Blinken's remarks right before that, and he was just talking about how important it is to take tough questions and how free speech is important. And the timing was really good for that. But look, what we just saw is the most accountability we will ever have for our criminal government. I mean, that's it. That's it right there. So I hope you guys enjoy it. I did.
Well, somebody should have thrown a shoe at him. That's the only thing that was missing. But yeah.
So, I mean, I think Max is great. Max is great for doing that and saying those things, and they're absolutely true. And it's just great that, Blinken was hoping to have a farewell tour where he can pat himself on the back. And unfortunately, he gets some truth, thrown in his face. And then it's just deplorable that, the U.S. wants to pretend that they give a fuck about free speech. And they don't give a fuck. They like to use it as a weapon to attack other countries. And other countries do regulate speech because speech needs to be regulated. But in whose interest is the speech being regulated? In the West, it's in the interest of the oligarchs. In the, in socialist countries, in democracies, it's in the interest of the masses. So it's two different things. But liberals and their fetish for free speech is just stupid all the way around because it's a concept that doesn't even make sense. You can't just allow people to say anything you want, anywhere you want. That doesn't work as a concept. So you have to regulate it. How you regulate it is what matters. And there's debate on that. Of course, people have different opinions. But ultimately, you've got to, if you're a government, you've got to determine how you're going to regulate it. And we see how our government determines how they're going to regulate it. And it's through, pulling old men out of asking questions from a press conference. It's imagine if that fucking shit happened in China. Imagine CNN this morning if that happened in China and you saw people being carried out for asking Shia.
I mean, imagine if it happened with one of Trump's. I mean. That's what I was saying about Jim Acosta. They made a huge deal because he told Jim Acosta to sit down and they wouldn't let him ask questions. They didn't fucking manhandle him and drag him out of the. I mean, they made a big deal when what's the guy for Univision, Jorge, whatever his name is, over. They asked him to leave because he was asking some questions about immigration or something. But this is much, much worse. And the whole thing has been about how Trump mistreats the press, and is rude to them and stuff. So yeah, it's just the hypocrisy is astounding. know.
No, I got your Acosta reference. It wasn't right at the front of my head, but yeah, vaguely. So they were lambasting Trump for not allowing, tough questions and not sitting there and taking tough questions and telling Acosta. What did he tell Acosta to do? Like,
I mean, he told him to sit down. Acosta actually was being, I mean, he wasn't even really asking tough questions. He was. I mean, there's no comparison. There's no comparison. This is, Trump has been a smart ass with the press. He hasn't. There's been nothing quite on this level. But the interesting thing to me about Blinken is that, like whenever I've seen like Code Pink or whatever, try and slap the handcuffs on Henry Kissinger and, disrupt meetings with John McCain and people like that, they don't look remorseful or aware, like they're pretty defiant. Whereas Blinken, you can tell he knows what he's doing is wrong, but he's doing it anyway because he's such a fucking coward. Which is almost more disturbing to me. You can tell when he's been disrupted by protesters calling him, a genocide heir. You can tell it's registering. His face, he looks guilty.
I think I disagree on that because I remember the Afghanistan withdrawal. And of course, everybody was mad, both sides of the aisle. And I don't even remember who it was. Someone asked him a question and he was so mad. He just picked up his little book and just stormed out of the room. I think with Blinken, he's a person who is not particularly smart, not particularly talented, but he loves the limelight. And he loves, like I've seen those very softball news interviews he would get early in the Biden administration and how he was just lapping up the attention. He has these, it's not even a parody. He uploads these guitar, like he plays the guitar.
Yeah.
He loves that softball attention. But I think he's very emotionally not stable. He gets angry very, very quickly. You can kind of see. So I don't think that's actually guilt. I think that's, anger. When someone challenges him, when someone makes him look weak or stupid, he doesn't like it. He doesn't handle it well. At least that's my take. I'm not saying you're wrong, but that's my
yeah, I mean, I would like, he ought to be guilty unless he's a psychopath, but he could be a psychopath. I mean,
I'm just comparing it to, there was a famous thing that happened, I think when they were honoring Henry Kissinger, and the proceedings were disrupted by Code Pink. And Medea Benjamin actually got very, very close to Henry Kissinger with handcuffs and like nearly got him on his wrist before she was tackled by security. And, Kissinger had this like almost kind of sly look on his face. And John McCain was at the podium and, was yelling at her like, "Get out of here, you low-life scum." And, there was confidence, there was defiance, even though she was screaming about war crimes and East Timor and Vietnam and all these places.
We know McCain's a psychopath. It's not fair to compare him to a known psychopath.
But with Blinken, you can see the psychological profile, the internal monologue, the debate, like the words that they're saying are registering. That's all I'm saying is that you can tell that I do think he's desperate for the limelight. I mean, with the keep on rocking in the free world, just utterly cringe whole persona of playing the guitar that he's created for public relations. But I just think that he just represents the banality of evil. He's just such a mindless conformist that just goes along with all this, even though I think the back of his mind somewhere he knows what he's doing is awful.
I mean, is some of it ideological? I mean, does he really believe? I mean, because a lot of Zionists have a tortured mentality, right? And they really believe that anti-Semitism is everywhere and the entire world hates Jews. And so we have to, we have to support Israel. We have to defend their little country. And it's only due to this irrational Jew hatred that their country's even under attack. Like their country did nothing wrong. So I don't know. I think he might have a lot of that, and that makes him like a bad person to represent the United States, on the global stage. But definitely, like a lot of people that are Zionists, they're ultra nationalists, ultra Jewish nationalists, and so you're willing to do what it takes. And you're okay with a little genocide. A little genocide never hurt anybody. That's just the mentality. I don't know.
I mean, I think from the way he is so devoted to Ukraine too, he's a hardcore imperialist, and we have late stage imperialist wars, which are often genocidal. So, I mean, I think to the extent, this wasn't because Biden was in a coma, there is a logic to it. And there's a coldness to Blinken. I mean, I see like with that, his exit interview when he did look uncomfortable with the genocide question. But I mean, that may have just been because it was laid out so clearly.
Yeah. I mean, I don't know. Who knows what goes on in his head if he's able to, compartmentalize and deny to himself that, he was, facilitating a genocide. I don't know. You would assume that that's going to be a mental struggle that he'll eventually lose, and he's going to age very quickly dealing with it. I mean, but look at Kissinger. That motherfucker lived fucking almost 100 years old. And he didn't look very good at the end, but I mean, the power for people to, justify their own actions in their own minds. I don't know. It's impressive. But Greg, you're a psychologist, so you should know better than us.
How hard it is to see what's going on. The defenses and layers of lies.
Yeah. So the last thing on my list to discuss. Oh shit, we're an hour in. Damn, I didn't realize we were that late. Max is a brilliant author, and he has written 2 articles, and he's in the process of writing another. I did link to Max's archive at the Covert Action Mag in the contents, but the most recent one was, I think, in November with about the Uhuru movement, and he really did a great was it December? No, it was November.
Well, the most recent one that came out was just the review I wrote of the No Nuclear War event with Scott Ritter. But yeah, the Uhuru 3 one was much longer. But yeah.
So I was gonna talk that up a little bit, Max, when you interrupted me, but I can. I'm just
as you were.
Long, and it's a real great deep dive in the the imperialist approach to dealing with the Black movement for liberation within America. So the civil rights movement and the movement really for socialism among Black people, they've always used the same strategy of equating them with being puppets. Being mindless puppets of first the Soviet Union and now kind of Russia, and that really came to the fore when they were indicting the Uhuru movement, saying that they were being puppets of Russia. And so Max's article, really great, goes into how that has been repeated historically over more than 100 years, that same slur and that same canard, and it's been an effective tool to indict and imprison, and just give a bad name to Black leaders who want civil rights and more socialism in this country. So that was all I was going to say about the first one. So that was from November, I think, and then the second one was a little bit smaller, shorter of an article. But I recall that it was about nuclear war, and it was in the context of the United States, Biden, giving the ATACMS and giving the okay for Ukraine to launch these ATACMS deep into Russia, which was definitely provocative and definitely could have, if Russia wasn't more restrained and patient, if they didn't know Trump was on the horizon and they were going to see how that played out, it could have really been a real escalation. I will give Max the choice. He's got 3 articles he can discuss. Which one would you like to discuss first, Max? Because,
well, I mean, we can talk about the no nuclear war. I mean, I wrote that specifically. It was an event that I was assigned to cover, and actually, while the event was going on, was exactly, I believe it was the same day as when the Syrian government fell. So the whole thing was backdropped by the developments in the Middle East, which ended up sort of overshadowing the whole conference, which Scott Ritter had put together to sound the alarm about how the sending of the ATACMS was a game changer. And of course, after that happened, there was a lot of speculation that, about backdoor dealings must have gone on, that the Syrian government was, that there was negotiations between the U.S., or rather the incoming administration and Russia, that, there was all these people like Pepe Escobar and others saying that the Syrian government was practically sacrificed to avoid having such a standoff where there would be a Cuban Missile Crisis like scenario, because I mean it has sort of been mounting. I mean clearly what Biden did, sending the ATACMS, was intended, as a lot of his moves have been recently, to undermine the incoming administration. Trump campaigned on saying that he was promising to negotiate an end to the Ukraine war. Presumably, he's going to follow through on that. I was anticipating there was much more of a guarantee that would happen. Let alone, I did not anticipate at all that Trump would play as much of a role in getting a ceasefire in Gaza. So I'm assuming that he's going to follow through on that. But so anyway, that article was written sort of in that context that, yes, that, the tearing up of all these agreements, there's the only, and actually the most recent defense budget that was passed has very frightening provisions in it, because now B-52 bombers can carry nukes. The New START treaty, which is the only remaining nuclear agreement between the U.S. and Russia, non-proliferation agreement, is going to be expiring in a little over a year. And, now B-52 bombers can carry nukes. So they're not even adhering to that. So presumably there is no real non-proliferation agreement left. So it's a very scary situation. There's a real existential dilemma here. The United States and Russia are sleepwalking into what could be a confrontation, and there's plenty of speculation about what went on with Syria and what's going on behind closed doors between this new administration and Russia. But it has to be taken seriously. I'm not a doomsdayer, but nevertheless, this is pretty serious. So that's why I titled the article, because Scott Ritter, is very emphatic about it, that this is a really serious situation, because there's no diplomatic channels going on. There's no hotline communications. The two countries are totally leadership are totally isolated from one another. It's Russia's been ostracized to that degree by these fanatical Russophobes. Hopefully that will change with the incoming administration, but Biden's doing everything he can to make that not possible. So, yeah, that's what the crux of that article was about. And, but it's related to, what's going on with the Uhuru 3 and what you were saying about free speech. I mean, thankfully, since I wrote that article, in the meantime, they weren't acquitted, but they are not going to have to do any jail time, which is great because Chairman O'Malley is in his 80s, which would have effectively almost been a life in prison sentence. So, but that's only because the jury didn't buy the FBI's case. I mean, the FBI people that testified, they totally caved on the stand. They had no case against them. This was just about intimidating any people dissenting against the Ukraine war out there. And, even though liberals that claim to stand with BLM and, these totally co-opted versions of Black liberation, the corporatized movement, they're nowhere to be found. The New York Times wouldn't even cover the Uhuru 3 case, even though these people were charged with being foreign agents for doing nothing at all other than, they're not a militant organization. They do a lot of community work. They're very, they're very anti, they're very critical of the welfare state and how it actually, ends up creating this cycle of dependency where African Americans are, actually discouraged from being productive members of society and are ended up. And they call it poverty. I watched an interview with Chairman O'Malley. He was calling them poverty pimps. They have a very, they preach autonomy and self-reliance and community building and things like that. But they're one of the last vestiges of the authentic Black left. And of course, that's who's, and the article was really about how, this revival of McCarthyism and Russophobia, inevitably the real serious political victims of that would be African Americans on the left, because that's historically who it's always been. And all these liberals who champion Russiagate, never took that into consideration that because they're totally ignorant of history. And I gave numerous examples in the article of who was politically persecuted in that way, from W.E.B. Du Bois to Paul Robeson to the Panthers. They were all accused of being, a Soviet fifth column, that Moscow was using America's racial inequality to undermine the United States. And but all these issues that I talk about in both articles are intertwined.
So and then the end of your second article, we discussed how Biden is trying to make it as difficult for Trump as possible, but it's already seems like a situation that is not solvable. Because, I don't know if, Putin would be willing to compromise to the extent that Trump would deem necessary, so Trump doesn't take so much political heat about being a surrender monkey and losing to Putin. Can you imagine how the media would just gang up on him and say, Putin beat you, you lost, like you surrendered to Putin. He doesn't, Trump can't put up with that. And so he's, it's like an untenable situation. But so your third article kind of discusses some leverage maybe that the U.S. could put on Putin to force concessions, or at least threaten to, which is the situation in Moldova and Transnistria.
Well, I think that no matter what sort of what's the word, placation Trump does of Russia, there's just, I'm not sure how much of that is going to make a difference. I mean, I hope it does, but with the U.S. encirclement, NATO encirclement of Russia, there's just numerous, as it continues trying to pull these countries in Russia's near abroad into its orbit. I just think that there's other flashpoints that are going to occur, and one of them is, I mean, this is clearly what Ukraine's trying to do. I think Ukraine is trying to undermine any sort of diplomacy between the incoming administration and Russia, because they just, right before Trump takes office, 20 days before, on New Year's Day, they allowed the gas contract they had with Russia, Ukraine, to expire. And that has triggered an energy crisis in Europe. You have numerous European countries dependent upon the gas that flows through the Soviet era pipelines into Europe. And one of them is Moldova. And Moldova also has the issue of having an enclave in the east that is, landlocked between Ukraine and on its border, that is a pro-Russian breakaway state, mini state, and it's called Transnistria, officially the Pridnestrovian Moldavian Republic, PMR, and it's one of many frozen conflicts that's been at a stalemate since the early 90s. It's under the protection of Russian peacekeepers. It's an industrial hub. Moldova gets its electricity from there. Since the cessation of the gas contract, the rest of Moldova is able to get energy from the European Union, but Transnistria is totally dependent upon utilities from Russia. So it, in the meantime, has been plunged into, there's rolling power outages, and they're running out of heat. I mean, it's the middle of winter, so this is a crisis that could come to a head. And the reason I think it's, significant is because in that famous RAND Corporation document, Overextending and Unbalancing Russia, one of the clear objectives that they state is siphoning off Transnistria from Russia. So I think clearly what Kiev is trying to do is draw other countries into the conflict, or it expands, spill over the conflict into neighboring countries. And you could see that's already almost happened a couple times because of the proximity of Transnistria. So that could become, there could be more bloodshed there. There was a short war in the early 90s, as I said, where the separatists in Transnistria tried to carve out their own state, and interestingly, they, for any, Soviet files out there, I mean, they did not, Transnistria, when it seceded, it did not recognize the dissolution of the USSR officially. So it's actually the last remaining little Soviet republic that exists. I mean, it still flies the hammer and sickle on its flag. So it's actually been referred to as the country that doesn't exist, or I mean, and this could become the new, the latest proxy war to break out between the U.S. or between NATO and Russia, and most Americans have never even heard of it. So.
And it's a logistical difficulty for Russia because there's no contiguous land going towards it. It's like a little island between Moldova and Ukraine.
That's a great point.
Giant arms depot there too.
Yes, the largest arms depot in Europe is located in Transnistria, which is another reason it's strategically important. So
Zelensky's decision to terminate the gas transiting through Ukraine is causing problems. Now, Slovakia, what's the guy in Slovakia's name?
Fico.
Okay, did he got they attempted to assassinate him, right? So
Yes,
somebody maybe Garland Nixon was explaining that he is a pro-Soviet Union old school leftist, which was very shocking to me. That's somebody.
I don't know
if
that's accurate.
Okay.
I mean, he's definitely.
It sounded crazy, but I mean, I believed it because I'm naive. But it sounded interesting. Like, how would a guy like that get elected in this day and age if he's out front pro-Soviet?
I mean, that sounds more like Lukashenko than Robert Fico.
Well, yeah, no, for sure. But no, they were definitely talking about the Slovakian guy.
Well, Slovakia is one of the countries that's impacted by this deal being suspended. So Robert Fico has weighed in heavily, and actually Slovakia has threatened to cut off utilities to Ukraine in retaliation. So again, they could become involved somehow in what transpires. I'm not saying that Slovakia and Ukraine are going to go to war or something like that, but it's triggering an energy crisis. Yes, there was an
Slovakia sends electricity.
Yeah,
to Ukraine.
They have a utilities deal, and yes, Fico. There was an assassination attempt on him because of his opposition to arming Ukraine, but there's other countries like Austria is also impacted by this as well. And the whole conflict, the Nord Stream 2 eco-terrorist incident. I mean, it's been a huge element to this war. Has been the energy component, because they have to. A lot of this has been about undermining Russia's energy foothold in the European continent, so that European countries will purchase for more expensive rate energy from the United States instead. So that's, and also you've even seen Ukraine recently attacking the Turk Stream pipeline in Russia recently. So they're really making some desperate moves here, trying to escalate the proxy war, possibly because they see some sort of peace deal being negotiated in the near future that they don't want to happen with the incoming administration. So,
and then the West is trying to make sure that these decisions that Ukraine ostensibly is making negatively impact those countries more that are not on board with the West. So like Slovakia and Transnistria. And they're trying to bring usher the pain towards those countries that
and the West has been meddling in openly meddling in Moldova, both Moldova and Romania.
Oh yeah, no, Moldova was
had elections where there was clear Western intervention going on, where they're trying to stop the ascendancy of these populist candidates that are running on campaigns pledging to stop their participation in this proxy war that is really impacting the European economy. And so they don't want other Robert Ficos coming to power throughout the EU. I mean, Moldova's not in the EU, but
who is
Romania.
that heavy-set analyst he's got the long bangs? He was on Garland Nixon yesterday. He was the one that was saying Fico was an out-and-out supporter of the Soviet Union. He was in the Navy before. Anyway.
I mean, maybe he is. I don't know too much about his politics. He strikes me as more conservative, but he does have certainly some good things about him. I mean, I think his stance is pretty courageous.
Yeah. What else?
Well, I mean, my article, I'm not done with it yet, but it really gets into a lot of the historical background, of course, of how this crisis came to a head, and it's actually really interesting the history behind Moldova and Transnistria in relation to Romania, because all these frozen conflicts all go back to decisions made by the Soviets, because the region used to be known as Bessarabia, and or I guess it still is considered that, but there were territorial divisions made in the Molotov-Ribbentrop Pact because Moldova had been under the Kingdom of Romania, and during the Molotov-Ribbentrop Pact, a huge section of it was given back to the Soviets, and Romanian nationalists, a lot of Moldovans speak Romanian. They consider Moldovans and Romanians to be one ethnic group. So under the Soviets, the Moldovans were encouraged to use the Cyrillic script, not Latin, and Russian was made a second official language. So when the Soviet Union broke up and Moldova declared its independence, they removed Russian as an official language, which of course infuriated the Russian speakers in the country, Transnistria being one of the places where Russian is overwhelmingly spoken. And so there's this ethno-linguistic conflict that's at the heart of this, that goes back to the Soviet times. And of course, under the Soviet Moldova, there was a period, obviously, during World War II where it was occupied by fascist Romania. Romania had was one of the countries that invaded the USSR.
We have live fact checkers.
Oh, thank you. Okay, that's a great point. Yes, it was. But anyway, the Soviets did encourage the use of Cyrillic. But yeah, it's an ongoing controversy. I mean, Romanian nationalists believe that they're one ethnicity, and that Moldova should merge eventually with Romania, which is something that people living in Transnistria felt very threatened by, which is why they took up arms, similar to the way that all these other enclaves in that part of the world, in Russia's near abroad, felt threatened, like the same way that the people in Donbass felt threatened by the Banderite coup in Kiev, and so on and so forth. It's another one.
In Georgia.
Yeah, it's another one of those conflicts, and the history is really, really fascinating, and you have to learn about it to really fully understand. This isn't just about, the cessation of a gas contract. It has many, many complicated historical questions behind it.
So, how close are you to completion of your article? How long do we have to wait?
Pretty close.
Okay.
But the place I'm submitting it, I don't want to badmouth them. They take their sweet time publishing things. So
It's not Covert Action Mag?
yeah,
it is.
Probably be
Okay.
a few weeks to a month before it comes out.
Okay.
But
Yeah, that's where I link to. And so you can check out Max's two most recent articles, and then the third one will be there at some point. I thought of a great drinking game, but I was going to mention this drinking game viewers can play at the end. Is there anybody else want to discuss something? Okay, so the drinking game is when you hear a siren, you guess if it's from Baltimore or Chicago. Like flipping a coin.
Every single time I do one of these, there's always I don't know what it is. I swear to God, it's not that bad in the area I live. But yeah, it's funny.
It's definitely not my neighborhood, and I was doubting it's Moscow, so I knew it was either Chicago or Baltimore. But
it was Baltimore.
Okay.
The Wire.
Yeah.
So it's not that bad. Somebody's not going to get drunk playing that game, watching our show. You're saying?
Well, they might, but yeah, it's really. I swear, it's really It's not that bad out there.
You don't fear for your safety leaving your apartment. That's good.
No.
Yeah, well, let's wrap up. So I just want to thank Greg and Max very much for joining us. We will be
Thank you,
back
Billy.
next week. We've been doing programs once a week. We used to do them twice a week. We'll continue doing one or the other. No promises. So either next week Tuesday or next week Friday. Ian, thank you for being my co-host as always. And we will see you next time. Thank you very much.